Brandon Ingram is out indefinitely after suffering an ankle sprain. I'll tell you how long he could be out for and what it means for both his and the Pelicans' future. Plus, let's take a look at that San Antonio Spurs loss. I'm going to rant about that one. It's the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday, we are tipping off a week's worth of shows, and we're starting with some bad news and a Brandon Ingram injury, bad ankle sprain. We'll look at how long he's going to be out for and the impact on both his and the Pelicans' future. I got some thoughts also on that loss to the San Antonio Spurs on Sunday night. We'll get to those in the third segment of today's episode of Locked On NBA, of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And don't forget, sign up for the free Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter over at lockedondaily.com. So let's get started with the rough and sad and bad news of the day. And that was Brandon Ingram spraining his ankle, getting injured really in that game on Saturday against the Oklahoma City Thunder, stepping on Lou Dort after Dort flopped. He got hit in the face a little bit, but he completely flopped to the ground, and as Ingram came down from that, landed on his ankle. So gets injured on a bit of a flop there, which is just unbelievably disappointing. From the Pelicans, New Orleans Pelicans announced today that forward Brandon Ingram has been diagnosed with a high-grade low left ankle sprain. Medical imaging taken last night confirmed the injury, which occurred during the third quarter of last night's game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. His return to play timeline will be determined by how he responds to treatment and rehabilitation. Further updates will be distributed appropriately. So he is out indefinitely is what this is being referred to as. I think from past years, the Pelicans don't really want to put a timeline on some of these injuries. And when you watched this happen in real time, it looked nasty. You know, the saving grace is that this isn't an ACL tear or anything like that. And those don't usually happen by landing on someone. So I tweeted that out right after the fact that it's probably not going to be that. But this just sucks, right? Overall, this could not have come at a worse time for the Pelicans and for Brandon Ingram. You know, this team was finally healthy for exactly 1.5 games. You know, we could at least get a chance to somewhat see what could have been for New Orleans. You know, you don't have Zion Williamson, but the idea was, could this group that they assembled of Zion, Ingram, DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Yves Missi, or Daniel Tice, whoever was going to be their center, would that unit work? And we're probably not, I don't know if we'll get to see a minute of them play at all, right? Zion didn't play in the opener. And from there, just everything spiraled downhill for New Orleans. We're maybe going to see Zion Williamson in January is kind of what we're assuming. But some of the reporting from Shams Charania has not been promising in that, even if the Pelicans have been kind of good about what they've said when it comes to him. This is just so unbelievably disappointing. It's just like a curse. Look, I really wish I had more for y'all, but you know, what has New Orleans done to deserve this? We just like to have fun here and just be ourselves. And man, the basketball gods really aren't taking a liking to this iteration, this generation of the New Orleans Pelicans. 1.5 games of being healthy before this happens again. And it wasn't like Ingram did anything wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. It's just a play where you land on somebody. So the Ingram injury, I would not expect him back anytime soon is what this is sounding like. You know, a high grade, low left ankle sprain, a high grade sprain can mean some ligament damage, potential tears in there, but probably not to that extreme here. But a high-grade ankle sprain can keep an NBA player out at minimum a month. This one looked pretty bad, pretty rough based on his reaction. He had to be helped off the court by his teammates. He could not put any weight on it whatsoever. And when he came down on it, like the immediate thing that I remember was that DeMarcus Cousins injury, where he kind of just went down and was like, nope, nope, nope. And that was kind of what you saw here. So in a sense, it being a high-grade ankle sprain is positive. It's not positive, but by comparison's sake, it definitely is. But I don't anticipate him being back anytime soon. And we'll get into it in the next segment here. Could this have been the last game that he played? And I think there's definitely a feel of that. We don't know if that'll be the case. We'll see how he responds. But also when it comes to injuries for Ingram, those seem to drag on a little bit. This is not someone who wants to play unless he is 100%. And look, depending on what you thought about him in that playoff series against OKC last year, he might not have been fully healthy. Maybe that impacts him, though I think that just had more to do with Zion not being there and Ingram not being like a true number one guy. But overall, like this hurts. I guess the good news is it's not like it's going to sink the season for New Orleans. We'll get into Ingram specifically in the next segment here, but on the team side of it and from the team perspective, it's not like it changes much. This team is already bad. They're really basically at this point out of playoff contention almost assuredly, even for the 10th spot. So it's not like you go from being a good team to like, oh great, now we're going to miss the postseason. We're going to miss a ton of games, whatever it might be. It probably doesn't impact like a whole lot when it comes to playoff probabilities and things like that. Still looking at it, New Orleans, along with the Washington Wizards per Basketball Dash reference, is the only, I'm pulling up the BRI for the ESPN, whatever it is, basketball strength. I'll find it later. It's not like it's going to change much. They're already bad. This just makes them worse. It's not like you were a team, now you fall. It's just, oh yeah, this is going to be disappointing. But it does kind of, in a sense, feel like it closes the book on an era here. He could play later on in the season, and if you're him, you should. And I think that'll be an important thing, and we'll get into that in the next segment here. But overall, now you don't get to see him and CJ and Murray, and what those guys look like together. And that's just super disappointing, right? Every move they've made has kind of been undermined, due to no fault of its own by just other things. And this just group has not been able to get healthy and play together like whatsoever for a couple of years now. It's bad when my mom is texting me and calling me and being like, they've got to just start over and I'm sick of all of this, right? Like that's never a good thing here. So that's kind of where we are. Just a disappointing injury in a disappointing season. At least it doesn't derail it. If you're looking for a silver lining, that's kind of what I got here for you. But what does it mean for Brandon Ingram? What does it mean for a potential trade, free agency, all of that? Let's look at that. That's coming up here next because that does also have an impact on New Orleans. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying just magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you never have to worry about gotchas ever again. So when Mint Mobile says $15 a month, when you purchase a 3-month plan, they really mean it. Say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plan's jaw-dropping monthly bills and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Ditch those overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offering your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. $45 upfront payment required. It's the equivalent of $15 a month. New customers on the first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 4 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday, even in a lost season, to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. We got a lot to cover here. Trust me, we'll get into the draft and all of that, but there's big picture things that are really important for this franchise this season. Also, your favorite podcast, Locked On Pelicans, has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. So let's keep talking about the Brandon Ingram injury. It's more important than the games. We'll get into the San Antonio Spurs game in the next segment. I'm going to rant about that one because that game bothered me for a variety of reasons that I want to share with y'all. But Ingram, so what's it mean, right? Okay, we get the injury. He's not coming back for minimum a month, let's say. Probably longer than that. What does it mean? My first gut feeling on this is it does feel like it could be his final game in New Orleans. I don't know if it will be, and I think there's a good chance he plays again this season, but it does have that sense of finality to it. They've been actively trying to trade him, but haven't found any takers. And now with an injury, let's say it puts him out for a month and a half. So he returns around January 20th or so. The trade deadline is pretty much 2 weeks after that. His value's only going to have gone down if you don't have anyone offering much for him, and no one really is. They weren't even in the off season. They weren't asking the world either. They weren't asking for that much. His value's only going to go down. So I struggle to find an area where they trade him, just at the contract that he's on and making the logistics of that work out, right? So even if he plays, they're not going to be able to move him. So trade deadline passes. He's still on the Pelicans, and now that leads to the offseason. There's no money in free agency. The Nets aren't going to sign him to a big deal. The Pistons won't have as much money as you think in free agency when it comes to that. There just aren't going to be takers there, really, when it comes to it. So he can either re-sign here in New Orleans or try and find a sign-and-trade situation. But again, no one's giving him what he wants. If someone was going to give him a max and he wanted to play there, they could have, right? Jake Fisher the other day reported on Mark Stein's Substack, which I pay for and you should subscribe to, especially since they got Jake Fisher there, who's one of the better insiders, in my opinion, in the league, said there were no substantial talks with the Utah Jazz about it. And that's one of the teams that we've heard, mentioned a good bit in there. And while I think there were some exploratory talks, it's Danny Ainge, right? There's nothing really going to happen. So if they weren't going to do it, then where's it going to be, right? Where's the trade going to happen? And I'm not really sure. Not at the money amount that he wants, not at the dollar amount that he wants. So does he re-sign here in New Orleans? Look, if you're the Pelicans and they like him, and Ingram likes to be here. I think one of the things, even with like signing with Clutch and all that, is he's not like, get me the heck out, right? I said on the show the other day, like, I don't see how it could get messier here. One, that's not really Ingram, and I don't think that was going to be the case anyway, and I certainly don't think it's going to be the case now after the injury, right? If you're the Pelicans, this injury has to lower his value in your eyes. They've talked to him about extensions that are below the max. He wants an average value of $52 million a year. He's not going to get that. Would New Orleans sign him at 40? I think they would be very open to that. But when you look at how many games he's missed in a Pelicans uniform, can you really do that? Even if you get him on what you would call a team-friendly deal, $38 to $40 million a year, let's say, can you really sign him to that when it's another injury? And again, it's not his fault. I don't want to say soft or anything like that. This one isn't his fault. But can you really do that? Can you really sign someone who at this point looks a little injury prone to a long-term deal that is important, for your team? I'm trying to pull up how many games he's missed as a Pelican here to see if we can find out. And I think the answer is no, right? Like 40 million? No. 30? Sure. You can take a risk on a guy for that kind of money. But at 40 million, like, no, I really don't think you can. And so this injury, especially if he misses 2 months, or maybe he misses the rest of the season, right? Maybe they're just like, yeah, no, you don't need to play, and we're just going to kind of shut it down for the year. Because at that point, if he were to be coming back in, say, February, say it's 2 months, right? 2 months from today is just after the trade deadline. It's February 6th, I think. I might be wrong on that. I don't have it in front of me. What's the point of playing anymore? 2 months of play, even if it's good, isn't going to raise his trade value or anything like that. It just kind of is what it is. So at that point, do they just shut him down? And they might. And at that point, you just can't sign him to, a 5-year, $200 million deal. That doesn't seem smart, especially because you're not getting rid of Zion and you still these two don't play, right? Like that's the issue here. You just can't sign him long-term, even if he wants to be here. On the right contract, sure. 150 over 5 at $30 million a year. Yeah, you do that. Everyone's going to need to get used to sticker shock when it comes to this. Like Trey Murphy's going to look underpaid in the future when you start seeing guys making $60, $70 million per season in the NBA. But Ingram has missed a lot of time in New Orleans with injuries the past couple of years. And, he's going to miss even more time. And that's just, can you do it? And I think the answer to that feels like no. So even if you want to bring him back, even if he's amenable to a really team-friendly deal, like, yeah, sure, you obviously do it, but I don't know if you feel good about that necessarily. And this has nothing to do with Brandon Ingram, the human, or anything like that. But you look at the games played here, and it's not great, right? You had 20. So once we got past like the lockout, the shortened years here, because not the lockout, the COVID years, right? So skip the 2020, 2021 season. I'm about to sneeze as I'm recording here. And, oh, sorry. If you look at 2023, 2024, 2025, right? He played 45 games in 2022, 2023. 64 last year is not bad. Not amazing. It's not the threshold to, win an award or anything like that. That's 65 games. And this year, he's going to miss even more time. That's a lot of games missed. That is a lot of games missed. He's only played 70 games one time in his NBA career. He's only played 3 times in his 9 years in the league, one of those being a shortened year. It's tough, right? This is one of the reasons why, potentially people want to move on from Zion Williamson, the same thing. Like, he's just not there. He's not playing. To quote Mike Detillier here, the best ability is availability. And these guys haven't shown it. You could maybe get by with one of those guys, but the other, no. So here's the thing though. Can New Orleans afford to let him walk? And we'll look at this later in the year, just let him walk. We'll look at it from the salary cap perspective, right? Can you just let him walk without getting some mid-tier salary back, some other guys back? Could you trade him right now for 2 $15 million guys? Would you do that deal? Those guys can be movable in the future with your draft picks or other things like that to try and upgrade the roster. Because even if you just let them walk, they're not in a good salary cap situation necessarily. They still wouldn't be in a bad one, but it puts them in, very much a predicament here, it feels like, and that's not great. And so this injury, look, it definitely is going to hurt Brandon Ingram's contract. No one's going to offer him the max. Not that anyone was before, but I think this is also going to impact what the high-end number teams were going to offer him. They were like, no, we're not going to offer you 52, but we'll offer you 45 a year. Are they going to offer that now? This could not have come at a worse time for Brandon Ingram, and that sucks for him. It really does. Like this, no one wins in this situation whatsoever. This is just one of those where it absolutely sucks and it's disappointing, but that is just how this season is going in New Orleans. Season also isn't going well when you lose to the San Antonio Spurs, and I want to get into this game. I don't want to focus we'll touch on the OKC game too, but really this game against the San Antonio Spurs bothered me, and I have one stat that I want to share with y'all from that. That's the most telling, and that we're going to look at that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get ready to tackle all the NFL and NBA action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you just need to visit FanDuel.com to join today. What I love about it is the lines are always updating. Middle of a game, middle of the first quarter, you realize a player goes down or momentum shifting late in the fourth. The lines are constantly being updated, so that game you're watching where you have the feel for it, you can get in on those updated lines, make a new bet in the middle of the game, and you can do that over at FanDuel.com. And you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Not only is Brandon Ingram out, Derek Carr sounds like he's going to be out for a while too, potentially the season. What's that mean for the Saints and just the future? Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints is going to make sense of all of that even after the Black and Gold get a win there. We are going to look at that over at the Locked On Saints podcast. Make them your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Pelicans did play 2 games over the weekend, going 0-2 to the Oklahoma City Thunder and the San Antonio Spurs on a back-to-back. Look, that loss to the Thunder, you can kind of chalk it up to them being a much, much, much better team. And credit to the Pelicans, they deserve this, for fighting in the second half. But in that first half, they looked disinterested in playing basketball. They looked absolutely disinterested in playing basketball. Unorganized, like there was no game plan whatsoever. The offense literally was just stagnant. Nobody moving after that initial pick and roll screen. It's just more of the same. And that was rough. It's one thing to lose. It's how you're losing and how bad you look in these losses that I find so frustrating. But whatever. Brandon Ingram goes down. The momentum swings. Not that they were doing well in the first place there. But it's a better team beating up on a bad team. Okay, we can live with that. The loss to the San Antonio Spurs, I find very frustrating. 121-116. No moral victories for me here. One of the things I said about moral victories, which look, I thought those ones could have been earlier in the year, as long as you learn from them and make adjustments and make changes and grow from that. But you have not seen the growth from that. You have not seen the growth from that. And that's why moral victories matter if you do that. They don't matter if you don't do that. And this team has not done it. And you didn't see them do it in the 121-116 loss to the San Antonio Spurs. In this game, Victor Wembanyama played just under 26 minutes. Just under 26 minutes. And here's the thing. He got injured, right? He got injured and he went to the locker room. Was out of the game for a while. You have a glorious opportunity to take advantage. And the Pelicans did not do that. Victor Wembanyama went out. They don't really have another big. Zach Collins wasn't playing for the remainder of this game. They don't really have another big man. And at that point, New Orleans, they have Charles Bassey, who is fine, but I mean, come on. That's not a guy that should just be lighting you up, who this season is averaging 4.2 points per game. You have a glorious opportunity to take advantage of a weaker opponent now. And the Pelicans did not do it. The stat I have for you is a 0. 0. That's what the plus minus was for the San Antonio Spurs in the minutes where Victor Wembanyama wasn't on the court. The Pelicans played the San Antonio Spurs even when Victor Wembanyama was off the court. Look, you have to take advantage of those minutes. You have to stretch your lead when he leaves the court. When he left the court and went to the locker room, New Orleans needed to go on a big run. Now, they went on that run in the third quarter when he was kind of on the court, so that was kind of impressive. But the San Antonio Spurs closed it out on their own run, and New Orleans didn't have an answer for it. Look, if you can't beat the Spurs when they don't have Wemby on the court, I don't know what to tell you. That is just horrific by New Orleans, and that's why they lost this game. They fought back. They fought back, and then Victor Wembanyama in the fourth quarter checks out of the game, and the Spurs immediately go on a 6-0 run. You can't do that. You have to win those minutes when the star players aren't on the court. New Orleans, I don't want to say is at full strength. They're not. There's no Brandon Ingram. There's no Zion Williamson. But you can take advantage of some of those lineups, some of those that groups that we saw from the San Antonio Spurs here. And New Orleans didn't. And that's unbelievably disappointing. You had a great opportunity to win this game. And, just kind of repeatedly could not get out of their own way themselves. New Orleans had only 8 turnovers. That's a really good number, but it was turned into 15 second chance points for the San Antonio Spurs. That's really good, right? The San Antonio Spurs, despite New Orleans just having 8 turnovers, turned it into 17 fast break points. So they're running in transition even after made baskets, which you saw OKC doing. That's just getting back and hustling. And don't let them inbound the ball and just run against you where it doesn't look like you care. That is unbelievably frustrating to watch this team play like that. Look, you can nitpick the end of the game, and I don't think you'd be incorrect, especially with hindsight. After Wemby hit that 3, which put the San Antonio Spurs up 1, and look, close out on him. He can do that, right? Even if he's not an amazing three-point shooter, that is someone you've got to try and look at. He was 3 for 7 from deep in this one. That's 43%. That's a good number. And they weren't, not that you can really contest it, but put a body on him in some capacity. That's something Yves Missi is working on. But at that point, call a timeout. You have a chance to go 2 for 1. I don't think going 2 for 1 was the right idea there. Given that their offense and how much they were struggling, trying to just take a quick shot and then immediately missing that and giving the ball back to San Antonio for them to either take a 2 or a 3 and stretch the lead to, at that point, 3 points or 4 points, which puts you even in a bigger of a hole. That isn't it. Going 2 for 1 isn't the answer there. But you did have 2 timeouts, so you could have called a timeout to advance the ball and at that point maybe try to get into a better set. Instead, you settled for a mid-range, an 8-foot contested midi from DeJounte Murray and then the missed tip-in by Yves Missi, right? Those are the type of things. They were repeatedly wrecked in the pick and roll when Wemby wasn't out there. Charles Bassey was just doing whatever he wanted to do to New Orleans. He averages a little over 4 points per game, 16 and 12 from him. 8 offensive rebounds, 4 blocks. What is Charles Bassey doing beating the New Orleans Pelicans, right? That's terrible. You just can't do that, right? Like, that's the type of stuff that is so frustrating. You got DeJounte Murray, you got Herb Jones. You can figure out some pick and roll defense, and they haven't done that at all this season. That's Willie Green's calling card. It's just, I don't see the moral victory here. Yeah, they fought back from being 11 down. That's great. Every team in the NBA can do that. This is one that you've got to win, and they really didn't do anything to actually win it when that game was there for the taking. Just get this one. Make everyone feel a little bit better. And they couldn't even do that. It's not about the injuries. It's about other things, right? That's what we've been looking at all season long. It's not just the injuries. Those are a big part of it, sure, but there's so much more that makes this team look bad. Get this win. That's all anyone was asking for, and they weren't able to do it. Disappointing. Just unbelievably disappointing. That says there's bigger things here that need to change. Whatever that is. I'm not saying everyone needs to be fired or anything like that, but clearly what they're doing isn't working if you can't win the minutes that Victor Wembanyama isn't on the court. Let me know what you thought about this game or the OKC game or the injury to Brandon Ingram. Do you think he's played his last game in a Pelicans uniform? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. And I'll be back with y'all tomorrow. We get a couple of days off before the next Pelicans game. We got a lot to talk about, more coming later this week here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.